The Landmark Hotel in Los Angeles, California, is a place rich with history and shadows. Once a haven for artists and musicians in the 60s and 70s, it was known for its glamorous parties and rock and roll chaos. But it's also infamous for its darker secrets, most notably the untimely passing of one of music's brightest stars, Janis Joplin. Janis checked into the hotel in early October 1970 while recording her next album. Those who saw her in those final days described her as vibrant, though burdened by invisible struggles. On October 4th, tragedy struck. Janis was found lifeless in her room, leaving behind a legacy as one of the greatest voices of her generation. But her story doesn't end there. Not long after her death, strange occurrences began to trouble guests and staff at the Landmark. Cleaning crews reported hearing muffled singing in the corridors late at night, reminiscent of Janis's soulful voice. Doors would open and close on their own, and the sound of footsteps echoed in empty hallways. One night, a guest staying on the same floor as Janis's room claimed to see her silhouette. She described a figure with wild hair and a carefree posture standing near the elevator, as if waiting for someone. When the guest called out, the figure turned, smiled faintly, and vanished into thin air. Years later, a musician staying in the hotel had an eerie experience. He woke up to the sound of guitar strumming coming from the corner of his room. The guitar he had left leaning against the wall was now on the bed, as if someone had been playing it. Chilled to the bone, he searched the room, only to find nothing out of place except a faint scent of patchouli, a fragrance Janis was known to wear. He later recounted, "It felt like she was trying to tell me something, almost like she wanted to jam with me. But I couldn't shake the feeling of sadness, like she was trapped, longing for the life she left behind." Janis's room, Room 105, has since become the center of many ghostly tales. Guests brave enough to stay there often report feeling an overwhelming sense of melancholy. Some claim to hear faint humming coming from the bathroom, the very place where she was found. One guest even woke to see her reflection in the mirror, staring back at him with her piercing eyes before fading away. Staff avoid entering the room alone, citing unexplained cold drafts and flickering lights. One night, a housekeeper saw the shadow of a figure sitting on the bed, only to find the room empty when she entered. Some say Janis's spirit lingers because of unfinished business. Others believe she stays to watch over the musicians who follow in her footsteps, a guardian of rock and roll creativity. While the Landmark Hotel has since been rebranded, its haunted reputation persists. Tourists and fans still visit, hoping to catch a glimpse of Janis or feel her presence. Whether you believe in ghosts or not, one thing is certain. The energy of her vibrant, turbulent life is etched into the walls of the hotel, a permanent echo of a star gone too soon. Visitors leave roses, notes, and guitar picks outside Room 105, honoring the legend who made the world sing but couldn't find peace in life. Maybe she's found it in the music that still resonates, even in death. One stormy night, a young aspiring singer named Mia checked into the hotel. She had come to Los Angeles chasing her dream, hoping to capture some of the city's magic. Struggling with self-doubt, Mia had heard the whispers about Janis Joplin's spirit, but dismissed them as urban legend. Exhausted, she fell asleep with her guitar by her side, the rain tapping against the window. Sometime after midnight, Mia woke to a strange sound. It wasn't the rain, it was music. A hauntingly familiar melody drifted through the air, raw and soulful. It was Janis's song, "Piece of My Heart." Confused, Mia thought someone nearby must be playing it. But when she reached for her phone, she noticed something strange. Her guitar, which she had placed neatly in its case, was now out and lying on the chair across the room. Its strings shimmered faintly, as though recently strummed. The room grew colder, and the scent of patchouli filled the air. Then she saw it, a faint figure near the window, backlit by the flickering streetlights outside. The silhouette looked out over the city, as if lost in thought. "Janis?" Mia whispered, her voice trembling. The figure turned slightly, and though its features were indistinct, Mia swore she saw the glint of a smile. Over the next few nights, Mia couldn't sleep. Every time she tried, The music returned, sometimes faint humming, other times full melodies she didn't recognize. They were unlike any of Janis's recorded songs, but carried her signature soulfulness. Curiosity consumed Mia. She began recording the mysterious tunes on her phone, hoping to decipher them. When she played them back the next day, the recording sounded distorted, as though layered with whispers. In one, a single phrase stood out, repeated softly, "Help me finish it." Mia's days became an obsession with piecing together the fragments of music. She felt an inexplicable connection to the spirit, as if Janis were reaching out to her specifically. But why? One evening, Mia decided to play the fragments she had recorded on her guitar, hoping to bring clarity to the puzzle. As she strummed the first chord, the lights in her room dimmed. The air grew thick, and the faint sound of applause echoed, as though a crowd were gathered just outside the room. Then the door to her room creaked open. Standing in the hallway was the figure again, more distinct this time. Mia's heart pounded as she saw the unmistakable outline of Janis's wild hair and flowing clothes. But there was something different. Her eyes seemed desperate, almost pleading. Before Mia could speak, the figure raised a hand, pointing to something behind her. Turning slowly, Mia saw her mirror begin to fog up, as if someone were breathing on it. A single word appeared, written in the condensation. "Beware." Mia began to wonder if Janis's spirit was truly at peace. What was she warning her about? Why had the music drawn her in so deeply? And why did it feel like the hotel itself was alive, its energy growing darker with every passing night? The next morning, she decided to leave the hotel, but as she packed her things, she found a note tucked under her guitar case. It was written on vintage hotel stationery, the ink smudged and uneven. "Don't leave. You're the only one who can finish it." Her hands shook as she held the note. How had it gotten there? And what was it? The music, the warning, or something far more sinister? As the shadows in her room lengthened, Mia realized she wasn't just being haunted, she was being recruited. And the cost of failure might be far greater than she ever imagined. Don't forget to subscribe and like if you liked this story. Unable to ignore the note, Mia decided to stay one more night, though unease gnawed at her. That evening, she set up her phone to record the room while she slept. She left her guitar on the chair where it always seemed to end up, wondering if it would move again. As the hours crept by, Mia tossed and turned, falling into a restless sleep. The dreams that came were vivid flashes of a smoky bar, a spotlight on a woman with a raspy, powerful voice. The crowd was faceless, swaying to the music. Then came the image of a notebook, its pages filled with handwritten lyrics and smudges of ink. One line stood out, glowing as though calling to her, "What if the last note sets me free?" She woke with a start, drenched in sweat. The room was silent except for the faint hum of the air conditioner. Her phone was still recording, its red light blinking steadily. But something was off. The guitar. It wasn't on the chair anymore, it was lying across her bed, its strings vibrating faintly. Mia grabbed her phone, hands trembling, and stopped the recording. Playing it back, she heard the sounds of her own breathing and shifting in bed. But just past the 2-hour mark, there was a distinct click, like someone plucking a guitar string. Then came a voice, faint but unmistakable. "Keep playing. Don't stop." The next day, Mia decided to research the hotel and its connection to Janis. She headed to the lobby, hoping the front desk staff could provide some insight. An older concierge hesitated when she mentioned room 105 but eventually leaned in, his voice barely above a whisper. "That room's seen things," he said. "Not just Janis. Musicians, dreamers, they all get drawn to it. Some leave inspired, but others, well, they don't leave the same." "What do you mean?" Mia asked. The man looked over his shoulder nervously before continuing. "There's a story about another guest back in the late 80s, a songwriter named Grace. She stayed in that same room, claimed she heard music at night just like you, wrote her best work there. But she left in a hurry one morning, pale as a ghost, muttering about unfinished business. She never performed again. What happened to her? No one knows. But she left this behind." From beneath the counter, The concierge produced a yellowed envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper covered in hastily scrawled lyrics. At the bottom of the page were the words, "It always ends the same way." Mia felt her chest tighten. The melody scribbled on the page matched the one she'd been hearing. That evening, as Mia tried to piece the lyrics together, the mirror in her room fogged again. This time, the message was different: "You're not alone." Before she could react, her phone buzzed. It was a notification, an automatic upload of her recording from the night before had finished syncing to the cloud. Curious, she opened the file. The video showed her sleeping as expected. But at the 3-hour mark, the camera picked up movement. A faint figure stepped into frame. It lingered by the guitar for a moment before turning toward the camera. Though blurred, its face was unmistakable. Janis. Her expression was intense, almost pleading, as she mouthed the words. Find the last note. Determined to uncover the truth, Mia picked up her guitar and began to play the fragments of the melody she'd recorded. Each note seemed to come more easily now, as if something or someone was guiding her fingers. As she played, the room grew colder. The faint sound of an audience swelled around her, clapping and cheering. It felt like she was no longer alone, as though invisible figures filled the room. Suddenly, a deep, guttural wail erupted from nowhere, reverberating through the walls. The applause stopped, replaced by a deafening silence. Then, a single voice broke through, low and mournful. "Don't let it happen again." Mia froze. She put the guitar down, her heart pounding. What was the last note? What did it mean to finish the song? And what would happen if she failed? The sense of urgency grew as the lights flickered. The faint sound of footsteps echoed down the hallway outside her room, drawing closer. Someone or something was coming. The footsteps stopped outside Mia's room. She held her breath, her heart pounding as shadows pooled under the doorframe. A soft knock followed a single, deliberate tap. "Who's there?" she called out, her voice trembling. No answer. Summoning her courage, Mia tiptoed to the door and peered through the peephole. The hallway was empty, bathed in flickering light. But when she turned back into the room, her blood ran cold. The mirror had fogged again. But this time there was no message, just the faint outline of a door she had never seen before. The image was unmistakable. A weathered wooden door with a brass knob, framed by cracked plaster. It was unlike anything in her room, and yet, something about it felt familiar. Then she noticed it. On the far side of her room, where the wallpaper had begun peeling, a faint outline of a doorframe emerged as though hidden beneath layers of paint and time. Driven by equal parts fear and curiosity, Mia pulled her phone flashlight from the nightstand and approached the wall. She pressed her fingers against the peeling wallpaper, and the plaster gave way with a dry crack. Beneath it was wood exactly like the door in the mirror. Her breath quickened as she found the knob, cold and tarnished beneath her touch. For a moment, she hesitated, her instincts screaming to stop. But then she remembered the whispers, the music, and Janis's desperate plea. With a deep breath, Mia turned the knob. The door creaked open, revealing a dark, narrow staircase spiraling downward. A faint sound drifted up from the depths, a melody, hauntingly familiar, played on an old piano. Mia descended the staircase, each step creaking beneath her weight. The air grew colder, thick with the scent of cigarette smoke and patchouli. At the bottom, she found herself in a small, dimly lit room. It was as if time had stopped. The walls were lined with faded posters from the 60s, and a vintage record player sat in the corner, its needle hovering over a spinning, silent vinyl. In the center of the room was a piano, its keys worn and yellowed. On the piano bench sat a notebook. Its pages were filled with scribbled lyrics and music notes, many of them crossed out or smudged. At the bottom of the last page was a single line written in bold, shaky handwriting. "Play it right or play no more." Mia's fingers trembled as she sat down at the piano. The air around her felt electric, as if the room itself were alive, waiting. She began to play the melody that had haunted her, her fingers moving instinctively over the keys. The sound was raw and beautiful, filling the room with a warmth that seemed to push back the darkness. But as she reached the final notes, her hands faltered. Something was missing, a crucial piece. The air grew heavy, and the room dimmed further. The shadows on the walls began to move, twisting into familiar forms, figures from the audience in her dreams, their faces now clear and filled with sorrow. Among them was Janis, her expression urgent. "The last note," she said, her voice echoing like a distant memory. "Find it, or they'll never let us leave." Mia's mind raced. The fragments of the melody, the strange lyrics, the warning in the mirror, it all pointed to something deeper. But where was the note? What was she missing? The shadows pressed closer, their whispers growing louder, more insistent. The piano keys began to rattle under her fingers, as if the instrument itself were demanding completion. Then, she saw it, a faint glimmer on the record player across the room. The vinyl spun faster, its grooves shimmering under the dim light. Mia rose and lifted the needle, her hands shaking. The music that emerged was faint but clear, the missing piece of the melody she had been searching for. As she turned back to the piano, the shadows froze. The figures stared at her, silent now, waiting. Mia sat down again, her heart pounding. She placed her fingers on the keys and began to play, weaving the new note into the melody. The air around her seemed to shift, the room brightening as the final chord echoed like a release. But before she could take a breath, the piano lid slammed shut, and the shadows surged forward, their forms dissolving into black smoke that enveloped her. A single voice rose above the chaos, soft and almost regretful. "It's not over yet." The room fell into darkness, and Mia found herself back in her hotel bed, the door and staircase gone. The only trace of what had happened was her guitar, now resting silently across her lap, its strings stained with what looked like ash, and etched into its wooden surface, in delicate, handwritten script, was a new message. "Play again." Mia stared at the message on her guitar, the word, "play again," burning into her mind. Exhaustion weighed heavy on her, but something deeper, a pull she couldn't ignore, drove her to pick up the instrument. She strummed a chord, and the room instantly darkened. Shadows seeped out of the corners like smoke, coiling and twisting until they formed the same faceless audience from her visions. At their center stood Janis, her figure clearer than ever, glowing faintly as if caught between two worlds. Mia's breath hitched. "What do you want from me?" she asked, her voice cracking. Janis stepped closer, her wild hair shimmering like liquid fire. Her eyes were pleading yet fierce. "Finish what I couldn't," she said, her voice low and gravelly. "It's the only way to set us free." The faceless crowd murmured in agreement, their voices overlapping like a low, mournful wind. With trembling fingers, Mia began to play. The melody poured out of her, raw and unfiltered, blending the fragments she'd heard with her own emotions. The room seemed to shift with every chord, the shadows swaying as though entranced by the music. As the final notes approached, Mia hesitated. A deep, gut-wrenching fear overtook her, as if the universe itself were holding its breath. Janis stepped forward, placing a translucent hand on Mia's shoulder. Her touch was cold but steady. "You know the last note," she whispered. "Don't be afraid." Drawing a deep breath, Mia closed her eyes and let her fingers find the final chord. The sound rang out, resonating through the room like a bell tolling the end of an era. The shadows froze, then dissolved into streams of light that flowed upward, disappearing into the ceiling. The faceless figures faded one by one, their mournful whispers replaced by a quiet, almost peaceful hum. When Mia opened her eyes, only Janis remained. Her form was no longer shadowy but vibrant, almost lifelike. She smiled, a bittersweet expression full of gratitude and sadness. "Thank you," she said, her voice now soft and clear. "You've done what I couldn't. Now we can rest." Janis began to fade, her outline blurring like smoke in the wind. As she disappeared, the room brightened, the oppressive weight lifting. Mia sat in silence, her guitar still in her lap. The air was warm now, the scent of patchouli replaced by something sweeter, like blooming jasmine. Looking down, she noticed something new on her guitar. Burned into the wood where the message had been was a single word, "free." Mia left the hotel the next morning, her mind swirling with the events of the past few days. The staff seemed unaware of what had happened. Even the concierge, who had given her the yellowed lyrics, simply smiled and handed her the bill as if nothing unusual had occurred. But something had changed within Mia. She felt lighter, more confident, as if a weight she hadn't even realized she was carrying had been lifted. She returned to her small apartment and began writing. The songs poured out of her, each one more powerful and moving than the last. One night, as she finished playing a new piece, she swore she heard faint applause echoing from the corner of her room. And when she glanced at the mirror, she saw the faintest outline of a wild-haired woman, smiling with pride, before vanishing into the night. Mia's music career blossomed, her songs touching hearts around the world. Though she never spoke publicly about what happened at the landmark hotel, every song she wrote carried a piece of the spirit who had guided her, a living tribute to the unfinished story of Janis Joplin and the music that would never die. Don't forget to subscribe and like if you liked this story.